The first time I sat with the gentleman, I said, you know what? And I didn't know him. I was like, you have great leadership qualities. I think one day you can become the Nigerian president, and I have a strategy for you. And he laughed because he was so young. So that time was one of the youngest governors. So I did some work for him, and I was learning more about the party. I was there when the parties were merging and to APC, and I worked especially in northern Nigeria where I had to cover up and everything. So I was learning new culture. Everything was just, it was interesting. I mean, sometimes I remember I would
When
sit
you look back, you're like, how did I do
that? Because
right?
I would sit in meetings, I'm excited, I'm giving a presentation. Usually I can't sleep the night before, I have butterflies, but I usually know my presentation will be good, and I make the presentation. By the time I'm done, I know, that was good. Cynthia, you are good. You're feeling yourself. Huh? And when I remember one time I finished, it's in a place called Zamfara, northern Nigeria. And I finished my presentation and I was feeling myself. I'm like, Cynthia, you're good. And then I was like, any questions? And then they just looked at me, and I noticed there was no eye contact with me. And then I realized, this room, I'm the only woman. And I think I learned how to dress a bit more decently working in northern Nigeria. And just learning, that a woman is still a woman. We're still a bit more fragile. And I don't always have to compete with men and trying to take the man's place. So I picked a few interesting things from there.
And like you said, it could have been an opportunity for you to get angry, but at the same time, it could be an opportunity to educate and, just enlighten someone.
Yeah, so after that, they were like, okay, why don't we do some work for the party? That also was a bit challenging because sometimes people will be like, but she's a woman. And sometimes you give your thoughts and you are ignored. It's like you're invisible.
No!
Yes. But I liked the governor that I had. I think he understood the challenges. And a lot of times he would be like, you sit here, you chair the meeting. So now people are forced to listen and to pay attention. So that was and people called, they're like, Cynthia, you guys can't win the elections. How can you get the president out of his office? It's impossible. But I prayed and fasted for 30 days. I did a campaign where I'm still fasting. I was just on liquids, and I was like, God is with me. I know we're going to win this election. And in every meeting, I was like, I know we're going to win. We must win. And a lot of times when I say that, I'm like, God, we have to win. I've told them as the leader, we are going to win. But I think it helps when you do the work and then after that, speak out and let people know that we are going to win, and speak out what you want for yourself. And it comes back to you. And so we won the elections. And I remember like in Kenya, I was trending for a few days, and even in Nigeria, and people were like, how was that possible? But I think when you believe in yourself, anything is possible. Anything is possible. And then when you understand that you have your own path, and not ask yourself too many questions. God, why did you bring me to Nigeria? Why am I not at home enjoying a husband and children? I really enjoy my path. It's very different, but I love it. And I've been able to do so much for Africa. Like even when I'm here, just one phone call, Nigeria, if we need something, I can call the Foreign Affairs Minister. We were talking 2 days ago. There's a minister on fast, he was calling just to wish me happy labor from Nigeria. And I'm like, almost everyone now is a phone call away. So I've been able to build those networks, and those networks are not for me, they're for Africa. And it's because I've accepted my path. That's the path God has built for me. He brought me to Africa to bring this continent together, and I've accepted it. And the more you accept it, the more you enjoy it.
too can get Chocha.
Top up every Monday and get 10 times bonus data bundle with Chocha Monday. Log on to www.smile.co.ug or visit any Smile outlet and top up now.
Smile. Now you can.
And you will be surprised by how many things you can do, because one of the interesting things is like when I first came here to Uganda, and you sit in meetings and it's a government meeting, and then people are like, but she's Kenyan, they can tell from your accent. I'm like, I know you people can tell I'm not Ugandan because I'm not so, your women are so beautiful and voluptuous. I know I'm not like that. I know, so you can tell I'm Kenyan. They're like, no, it's your accent. But they would always be like, but she's Kenyan. What is she doing working here? How is that possible? But God was always like, I've placed you there for a reason. And now I really see the reason why God brought me to Uganda. One was to shape me, to humble me. I've been humbled in Uganda. I have really found out who Cynthia is. But I'm proud of some of the changes that I've been able to make in this country. And the interesting thing is when you work in government institutions, budgets are not as big as people think. So a lot of times I'd use money out of my pocket, but it really feels like this is my country, and this is my home. And I would sometimes people would even call and you have no fuel and all that, I would pay. And I tell the driver, you fuel the car, let's go help, whoever is in need. Because I would feel like this is my home and I have to give my country my everything. And so any African country I've worked in really feels like home. And I give my blood, sweat and everything. And I think that's the way we should be as Africans. And I feel so bad sometimes when I see people, crossing over to Europe and they die in the boats and in the sea. And I'm like, we can't watch this issue as Africans and be like, oh, it's their problem, I'm here in Uganda. No, it's our problem. If our brothers are dying, it's our problem. If things are going on in Sudan, it's also my problem. I should feel it. And that's something now I'm really, when I give talks, to young people, I'm trying to just change their mindset. That now we need to look at Africa as one, and not just Uganda or just Kenya or Tanzania. We need to look at the continent as one. So that has been my journey. That's how I started. That's where I am at the moment.
I can imagine you're talking about being a woman and sometimes being in meetings and you're ignored or dismissed. But there have been a lot of challenges, just even going to different countries and then working with political parties. I can imagine there have been so many challenges. Have there been some really scary moments as well?
Yes, the interesting thing is I think a lot of times when we look at people who are so powerful, it looks like, ooh, I'd like all that power, or I'd like to have all those cars and the roads being cleared for you. But one of the things I learned is the more powerful it gets, the more, it's like when you're sitting in such an office every day, you're doing your duties of that office, but you're also trying to survive. There's so many games that go on. There's so many people just trying to trick you. There's so many people trying to bribe you. And one of the things I see a lot of people always talking about, they're like, oh, corruption is wrong, stop corruption. But when you work in those offices, you realize corruption is not a small game that can be discussed on Twitter and can be handled in one day. Corruption is a mindset, and a lot of times you get into an office and you find it's a very strong network that has been there even before you were born, and you find as you're fighting them, They've fought all those wars. They've met bigger people than you're like, who are you, Cynthia? You think you can clean this up? Oh, goodness. Anyway, you have fun. We're sitting here watching you. And you're like, I'm going to fight this. And then you realize, oh, they know how to play these games. They are always thinking 10 steps ahead of you. And they are very well oiled. Like they have everyone in every office. They can watch all your moves. They're very, very powerful. And then also the sad thing is, even us as citizens, as people, we allow corruption in our lives. If you give a police officer a bribe, you're corrupt.
Yeah. It's so deeply ingrained.
It's so deeply ingrained that even sometimes when you want to fight it, you're like, but even when I fight it, when I go back to the people, nobody is going to back me up. It's a very difficult fight. It's a very painful fight. It's one of the, I think, one of the most painful things I've ever gone through. For 4 years. My family paid for it. My soul, my heart, my mind, my health paid for it. There are times I found myself with no food, yes, they come for you. They know how to come for you. When you say no, and they're like, Cynthia, we'll come for you. And they're like, you're not the first one. And now I understood when I was going through those things, I was like, oh, now I understand the confidence you had in that meeting. And you go to people who you think will help you fight, and they sit with you, they're like, you're right, Cynthia. And then you realize they go back to the same people, they're like, can you imagine Cynthia came and said 1, 2, 3, and so you realize that corruption is, and sometimes, and they really know how to play the game, to the point where sometimes even when a certain person is trying to fight corruption, or a certain leader, or even a head of state, and I've seen this, even a head of state trying to fight corruption somewhere, they own the media. And the media is going to write something about that head of state that even you realize that maybe fighting this corruption is not going to be so good for this country.
Wow.
Yes, because you realize, okay, and they have good networks, and not just in one country. You realize that, especially when you work in political parties in different countries, you realize that there are sponsors in political parties. You see a Nigerian who is a sponsor for a Kenyan political party, and you're wondering why. And then you realize even when someone is a president, they're not really the president. They're just seated there, but they're the real presidents behind them who put you in that office.
And even when you to deliver
yes, you have to sing to their tune. And even when now you, as you're coming in trying to fight it, you have no support. The public, I wish the public could support fighting corruption. And I also understand that sometimes they also don't understand the games that go on. You can be very naive. I think some of the times I've said no to corruption, I was very naive. I should have left some offices.
So you've now learned to pick your battles?
Oh yes, I know how to pick my battles. I know how to pick my battles. And I always walk in there, I'm like, I have God on my side, I'm doing the right thing. But I've learned that wisdom is very important.
Sometimes.
Sometimes step back. But I've learned so much about the games that go on in corruption, and I think sometimes we should have these discussions because I think people are very naive on what corruption really looks like. And also they are naive because sometimes also the citizens are not that corrupt, so they don't know their games and how deep those games can go and how life-threatening those games can be. So in a way, I can say I've seen it all.
Because especially on Twitter, people can say
things, and what sometimes people don't know is, because I work in social, I do a lot of social media work, and sometimes people don't realize that you can see a story on social media that has been brought up by a bot, and you don't take time to realize this is a fake social media account, and you just believe it, especially if it's a negative story. Oh, we love that story, and that story is definitely true.
Oh yeah, it must be.
Yeah, it's true, and they'll be like, even me, I know that this happened. And I've read things about myself on social media. I think I have 5 children according to social media. Never mind that I only have a niece and that's it, but I have 5 children. I've seen people who I think are supposed to be my husbands. And jobs that I didn't know I have. Like sometimes things happen, and because I do a lot of political work, and something happens and they're like, Cynthia, you need to talk to your client, or someone has a speech, they're like, Cynthia, you wrote a really bad speech. I'm like, how is that connected to me? But people just assume things.
Yeah.
And when someone says, Cynthia, you wrote a bad speech, everyone comes in and they're like, Cynthia, how could you say that? This line. And I'm like,
even the people you're working with?
Sometimes even people who you work with go in and they're like, but I'm like, hold on, I've never worked for this client. I don't even know this client. But to people, it's the truth. And they come up with a hashtag and they'll have fun the whole day. Going off about it. And a lot of times what, again, people don't realize is sometimes even when you see a certain topic being brought up, maybe a government doesn't want the nation to focus on a certain crisis. So let's bring up another crisis on social media. And it's so easy.
Yeah.
And it's so easy. It just takes one tweet. And that's it. And people will forget a very serious issue going on in their country.
But that is a strategy
as well. It is a strategy. And that's why a lot of times I tell people, be in your lane, be in your purpose. Because sometimes I see messages and I'm like, this has nothing to do with me. If I wrote about it, I'd get 1,000 followers, but it has nothing to do with me. So I don't comment and talk about it. And even when people sit to talk about things, there are some things I will not talk about. It is not in my path. It is not anything to do with my purpose. And then you even realize my path is much more clearer, even as a person, because I'm not carrying so much. So even sometimes people write things about me, and people are like, say something, Sue. But I'm like, it has nothing to do with me, and whatever they say is not going to block my purpose. And I remember one time I was trending in Kenya for all the wrong reasons, about a story that was not true. And then in the next day, as I'm still trending, a day and a half later, I get a phone call and someone says, hello, how are you? My name is so-and-so from CNN and would like to interview you. And then I kept quiet because I was like, this is a prank call.
Yeah.
And they kept on talking and I was like, oh, they're serious. I said, you want to interview me? Yes. About what? It was about PR. And we had the interview, but the whole time we were having the interview, in my mind, I'm like, don't you guys know about me? Haven't you guys seen what's trending? Like, and when we finished, I had to ask. So I asked one of them, I was like, have you guys seen like what guys are saying on Twitter and everything? And they're like, yeah, we've seen, but you're a public figure. That's normal. People will say things. And we've checked you out. Those things are not true. But we like, we knew you'd be the best person to talk about this topic. So, and that's one thing I've learned. Just stick to your path. Stick to your purpose. And life.
Do you have any political aspirations of your own? Because I'm thinking back to your people telling you when you're young, this one's a politician.
I think I enjoy being in the background, and I can make a lot of changes in the background. I think one of the reasons why I like being in the background is I can do the work without people always bringing Cynthia on focus. Let's attack Cynthia, and sometimes when you attack Cynthia, it attacks the project I'm working on.
Okay. So
sometimes, I think for now, I like being at the back and letting things happen. So it's not in my agenda right now. But if I think if God says this is the path I want you to take, I'll take it. But I'm learning that you can influence the world in different ways. I have 2 Bible classes that I teach, one on Wednesday and another one on Saturday. And I teach women, and I teach them how to pray. I teach them how to speak into the lives of their children, into the lives of their husbands. Because one of the things I've learned is Uganda cannot be successful if we have broken families. If we have children who don't know what to expect of tomorrow. If we have husbands who cannot be leaders. If we have, and even sometimes I take other short classes with political leaders, and I teach them about God, and we pray, and we hold hands in their offices, and we pray, and I've learned that that without, sometimes you think it's the office that will make a big difference, that if I'm seated as a PM, I can make changes in Uganda, but there are certainly other ways I can still make changes for Uganda. And I think there's a reason why God has me right now in Uganda. I think Uganda is the country to watch. It has a lot of potential. I wish Ugandans knew what they have. I wish. Yesterday I was seated in a client's office. It's on 6th Street. Just at the junction. Yes. And they have no guards at the doors. Like, I was seated and people just walk into the office. They just walk in. And I'm like, and I was telling her, do you know this can't happen in Kenya? In Kenya, all our offices we have a guard. And a lot of times we'll check you before. You can't just
walk in.
Hello. And I'm like, you guys have security. I can walk home at whatever time. I see shops open at 4 in the morning. Like this area, Kabalagala, I was driving with someone. I was picking them from the airport, and they're like, oh, I can buy food. I can go walk into a supermarket. And you know what? It's 4 in the morning, and people don't have guards in all the shops. And so there are things about Uganda that I really love. Your young population is definitely the majority.
Yes.
You have oil. Oil is really big. And I wish Ugandans could understand what that oil really means. I think if I was Ugandan, I'd be in school somewhere learning more about oil. So that you make sure Ugandans own that oil. Yes. But I think it might bring challenges. There's likely then to definitely be a bigger gap between the wealthy and the rest. But those are things that every day I talk to Ugandans about when I meet young people, and even when you sit in meetings in government. Like, I have a clear picture of where I think Uganda will be 5 years, 10 years from now, and I know this is the place to be. This is definitely the place to be.
What's your advice to young women? Because you've been on your own journey, and something self-love and acceptance. Yeah.
My advice is life is a journey. Stick to your own path. Some people might seem like they are growing faster, others slower. But you stick to yours. Don't compare yourself with other people.
Thank you so much. We're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you so much.
I enjoy it.